Welcome to the Responsibility newsletter of GSR Services. Today we want to talk about the difference between ship recycling and material circularity. What we see quite often in the industry is a very common statement. For instance, the IHM in ship recycling means circular economy. We think it is time for a correction because, in our opinion, IHM in ship recycling as of today is not circular economy. So, what is ship recycling today? Primarily, it's segregation of materials, and this is done for the remanufacturing or trading of second-hand equipment, machinery, and also materials. So, when we talk about recycling, the output will be an identical or a same or a different product. But quite often we also see some downcycling. Whatever is done, it consumes energy, and with that it causes also some emissions. So the downcycling issue and the waste are the primary problem, and this is why ship recycling is not a circular economy. With the recycling, it means materials are kept in circles again and hopefully many times, but sooner or later they become wastes. And this is not what is understood to be circular. Because circular economy means that at the beginning of the product development, all potential impacts are properly considered and assessed. So, during the product design stage, some substances of very high concern or hazardous materials as we know them from the IHM might be detected, and they should be substituted as much as possible. It also means more data has to be gathered and it has to be provided along the use chain of these products to the very end where the materials will then finally be segregated. After the segregation, they have to be recirculated to shipping industry or to any other industry as resources, and when they use renewable energy, we can say that this is full recirculation and also no waste are generated. That means materials will be kept in the loop for a long time and not become waste at a certain stage. And that's the big difference between recycling and circular economy. Nothing becomes waste. Everything is kept in the loop. So let's look into the IHM data and why it is not a circular option. First of all, we see that the IHM quality today often is very poor. The initial IHM has been developed with a lot of assumptions, with so-called PCHM entries, potentially containing hazardous materials, or some samples simply have not been taken, or there are some misinterpretations of the rules and guidelines. In addition to that, the scope of the IHM itself is too limited to really support circularity. There are a lot of exclusions. Electronics, loose items, also consumables, they are all excluded from the scope of IHM, only have to be roughly documented before the ship is delivered to a recycler. But there is a huge gap and a big level of uncertainty when we only focus on the IHM data. The good news is the IHM itself can be modified. It is already a process along the supply chain, along the use of the ships, how to create it, how to maintain it. And if this is done properly, we can say we can achieve with the IHM procedure a compliance data exchange. But that also requires to get rid of this limited scope and to talk about so-called full material declarations. So the circular economy means we look at the entire life cycle of a product. The supplier and manufacturer, they have to exchange a lot of data and have to think about the product design. So once they can avoid the substances of very high concern, or if they don't find a substitute for those, then they have to document it properly. But not only the bad stuff, the hazardous materials or substances of very high concern, also the valuables should be monitored. This information is then made available to the shipyard, to the ship in operation for the IHM maintenance, and later on to the ship recycler, who we now call cradle-to-cradle separator. His task is to evaluate the data, to segregate the different materials from the ship and to redistribute it to the life cycle, also of other industries, not necessarily only the maritime industry. He can recirculate these materials to suppliers, to manufacturers, to shipyards, ship in operation, or any other industry. So the change towards circularity means we have to use the IHM circle as it is shown here from the manufacturer's point of view, who has to develop the material declaration, to the supplier, who has to do MD management by getting it from the manufacturer and delivering it to their customers. These can be shipyards for the IHM development. It can also be a ship owner for the IHM maintenance. And one day the ship will be delivered together with the IHM to the ship recycler, who of course has to be compliant with the Hong Kong Convention. When we change it, we have to look into full material declarations, listing all hazardous substances and all valuables. So the manufacturer has to develop those and he has to provide it to the supplier. The shipyard then does not develop an inventory of hazardous materials, but an inventory of materials. And this has to be maintained by the ship owner, and the ship recycler will recirculate all these resources. These full material declarations are key for having a proper inventory of materials. And only with that we can achieve circularity, because the material which is to be handled and can be distributed further is very clearly described, and not only a small selective part, which means hazardous materials as per the IHM, which in itself has a very limited scope. What is the full material declaration? It's an extended scope of the IHM as we know it today. Much more product data is required, otherwise the circularity can't be achieved. And for ships we will see a full material inventory. That might be an interesting aspect for the owner or for the financer, because they know all the valuables as well, not only the bad stuff. And based on a proper data collection and maintenance, we can really achieve a full overview of all hazardous materials and the valuables. And that's a big gain. And with that, we can really achieve a full material circulation. We have to think circular, because we all know that we can't recycle our way out of today's situation. We have to keep materials in the loop. Without that, we will not have a sustainable economy, we will not have sustainable shipping. We try to provide solutions. We are very close on really providing it to the entire industry, and we are very happy to hearing from you. And if you found this interesting, maybe you are looking forward to our next responsibility newsletter made by GSR Services. Thank you very much for listening.